Hey everybody, welcome to another Collage Live Online. Today we are officially launching our newest publication, Wallflowers, Collage as Street Art. This was a project many years in the making and a labor of love from all involved. It's a collection of the history, the artists, and the artwork that came out of Kolaj Street Krewe. I'm going to let the founders of Kolaj Street Krewe, Lance, Rosie, and Laurie, tell you more about the history of the project and their own practices. And then we'll hear from a few of the artists in the book that participated in the Kolaj Street Art Residency in 2021. At the end of this event, we'll have an audience Q&A, so feel free to put questions in the chat throughout the whole thing, and we'll either answer them as we go or when we get to the end. Before we get started, I also want to remind folks that the call for papers, artists, and projects for Kolaj Fest is open. Kolaj Fest is June 7th to 11th this year, so if you've got any ideas or something you'd like to do at Kolaj Fest, please submit it. The early deadline to submit is January 29th, and the final deadline is February 26th. And finally, Kolaj Institute relies on the support from the community. All of the events and residencies and publications are possible thanks to donations from you all. So please support us if you can. And if you can't, then thank you just for supporting us by being here today. That's also great for us. And maybe Chris or Rick can post a link to the Kolaj Fest open call and our support page in the chat. So without further ado, here is Lance Rothstein, aka Fan Club 13, one of the founders of Kolaj Street Krewe, to tell us more about the project. Take it away, Lance.
Hi there. Welcome, everyone. Can you hear me? Yeah. So I'm so excited about this book. To actually have it in my hands is just an honor, especially to have worked with all the people who worked so hard on making the art that's in here. It really is kind of a validation of, I think, all of our little teeny, what we may feel like are little teeny efforts, that end up having, I think, such a big impact. And Chris, again, thank you so much for all the hard work you put into putting it together. I know it was so hard, especially like you were saying earlier about picking out what you actually wanted to be in there, because so much of it was so interesting. And that's why I'm also going to share some of the outtakes that didn't make it into the book, from some of the earlier work. I just want to thank you again, everybody who worked and did work to go in it, and thank everyone who's actually bought it and helped support the project. Since this has come out, we have started a Facebook group for the Kolaj Street Krewe, and we'll be posting that link there. So anyone who's interested in collage as a street art practice can join that. Even if you're not doing stuff, you're just interested in seeing it. We're hoping that this, this book and the start of the Kolaj Street Krewe will really start this movement, as Rick so often calls it, a movement. Obviously, we're not starting it, but maybe it will be another jumping off point where we can add the element of collage or the art of collage to, the street art practice. So I want to start out by, I'm going to share my screen now. So let me just bring this up real quick. Give me a second. All right. Yeah, there we go. Screen. Here we go. Can you see this little grid yet? Yes. Okay. So I started doing street art in 2008. And you can see here, I was doing a little Polaroids, and so many of them came out bad that I ended up just collaging them. And then I was leaving them out on the street. So I do have a project called Picture Crossing online, where I've put more than 1,000 pictures, little Polaroid pictures out all over the world. So that was my first introduction to street art. And then I added collage to that later. Here you can see one of them I left in Scotland recently.
Can you full screen an image? Right now we're still just looking at the grid.
Is that any better? Let's see. How's that?
I'm still just seeing the grid.
The grid. I'm sorry. Give me a moment. I will.
No worries.
I'm going to stop the share and share it differently. Sorry.
Sure. No worries.
Okay.
And yeah, I posted a link to the Kolaj Street Krewe Facebook group in the chat for anybody who wants to join.
Thank you.
Hey, there we go.
Is that better?
Yep.
Okay. So yeah, this is one of the little Polaroids that I started collaging. And then here's like where I left it on the street in Scotland. Just to let you know what I do. So again, my name is Lance Rothstein, but I go by the name Fan Club 13, which is a somewhat of a tribute to the artist Ray Johnson, who started doing collage and mail art back in the 60s and 70s. So here, this is in the Netherlands. I usually try to put up in places that aren't too obtrusive. This is in Rome, right by that's the actual Colosseum right there. Here's in New York City, in Harlem. I often work on album covers or other kind of mass media. Here's a record, a LP record that I recently put up in Scotland. This is actually the day after the Queen died there. And then here's, we were asking like, oh, what have you done lately, right? So this is actually the Friday the 13th of January. I put up my first sticker of the year. There's this great wall, and I live in St. Pete, Florida. I actually live in Clearwater, but work in St. Pete. And so this is a nice sticker wall where everybody just kind of puts stuff up. And it's actually a nice little local area where lots of people are walking by. So my first piece of 2023, I can't believe I'm saying that. So now I just wanted to maybe show you a few little special outtakes. I was able to get into my little catalog that people had sent me from our first call for artists. I think this is back in 2020. I'm sorry, I didn't get to make it to the 2021 people yet, but I'll share that later. So this one here is, this is by Cindy Lee. I love this little one. And this is a perfect space. You know, it seems like kind of a temporary space, but it's also really great. You know, we get lots of public people looking at it, people walking traffic. Here, this is by Jody House. And you can see the little Kolaj Street Krewe hashtag there that I'm hoping we'll start using more. I know I'm guilty of not putting it on everything as well. Here, this is by Cosmonauti. I love that name, Cosmonauti. And so all these people are in the book. These are just some of the outtakes that didn't quite make it in there. This is another view of one of Llewellyn's pieces. And this is a great close-up. This was actually in the book here. This is a great image, but I thought it would be great to see the whole shot. I love this picture of the boat. So, you know, it's not always the urban, you know, high traffic, high graffiti areas that are ideal for spots. Rocio Romero. And here's one by Rosie. Remember this? And what I love so much about this is the after picture, right? Of how it degrades over time. It becomes more artistic. And that's one of the things I really love about street art, is going back to see what happens to it with the elements and stuff. Tim, you were talking about the rain and your pieces. I can't imagine what it's going to be like if it goes back to that rain again. Here's a really nice little piece that's really simple and small by Sarah Michalek. And then you can see just how small it was. Here's a piece by Shona. I'm not sure how to pronounce it. Chornecki, I believe. And then here's a nice little piece by Tamara Bowles. I think that's all I have there. Yeah. All right, so I'm going to stop my share. And so really that was just kind of like an appetizer, right? To get into the meat of the book. And hopefully you will, I know that everyone's contact information is there, and you can, you know, get in touch with all of these artists who have put so much time and energy into the art pieces. And I'm hoping that you can, you know, get some inspiration or some ideas or connections to continue the idea of making collage into street art.
Thank you, Lance. Next up, we're going to hear from Rosie Schinners. Rosie?
Hello, hello. Can everyone hear me? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to share some images while you...
I'm super honored to be a part of this publication with all of you. I think what started as just a little seed of people connecting and being really passionate about street art and public art blossomed into what we have and are celebrating today. So it's very, very cool. Oh, it's an oldie. You went through the archives.
Have some extra stuff.
Nice. Yeah, so as Christopher said, my name is Rosie Schinners, and I live on Salt Spring Island in British Columbia, Canada. And my medium of choice is paper, and I explore that through analog collage. This is one example of some of my collage work. I also do public paste-ups and murals, paper-based, and paper-based jewelry as well. And for myself, I've always had an admiration for art that's outside of the traditional systems of viewing. And when I say that, I just mean the gallery system. I appreciate the ability to bypass those structures, which increases the accessibility for not only experiencing art for the public, but for artists who may feel excluded from those sort of systems as well. And I have a quote that unfortunately I don't have the source, which sucks, but the quote is, "The whole point of guerrilla art is you don't have to attend a gallery to see it. You just need to keep your eyes open." And for me, I find art experienced in unexpected ways is often the most memorable and impactful. So what you have here, this is actually an example of a project that I started in 2017 called the Dystopian Reader. And sort of my first public foray into exploring guerrilla art and street art. And this project, you can see the handle up there. You can find it on Instagram at the Dystopian Reader. And what this project involves is me putting out collage bookmarks into works of dystopian fiction or dystopian themed books. And that would be in libraries or bookstores or wherever you find upsetting books, I think is in the tagline on Instagram. And I had the opportunity to share this project at the inaugural Kolaj Fest in 2018. And it was there that I connected with other artists that were interested in strategies of public art and street art. And two of them were Lance and Laurie. And that was sort of the first time that we kind of brainstormed about our thoughts around how collage could be explored as street art. And then the following year, we regrouped again at Kolaj Fest 2019. And at this version of Kolaj Fest, I wanted to explore a different element, not so much hidden art, but murals and paste ups. So I did manage to get one large paste up done before we had to shelter in place because of Hurricane Barry. So this is me getting that done. And Lance was the trusty photographer. So that was really great to be able to do that before everything got shut down. And yeah, I think, you know, moving forward, I think that we started something, just a meeting of minds that we want everybody to be part of. So I think although we can be described as the founders, you know, I sort of consider everybody who participates in this as a founder, because as long as you keep using the hashtag Kolaj Street Krewe, you're a part of this little movement that we started. This paste up, I didn't even know what Christopher was going to share, so just sort of talking as he's throwing them up here. This is on my little island on Salt Spring Island. I just did at an abandoned bus stop. And I think, you know, I live in a rural environment now. When I started my journey with guerrilla art and street art, I was in a city in Vancouver. And now living in a rural environment, I find that I have to come up with different strategies, or, you know, what does street art look like in rural places? So for me, like one image that Lance shared with finding trees to paste up on, and the nice little addition of seeing how nature interacts with the pieces as well. I'm looking in terms of, you know, what I'm going to be working on going forward, because the Dystopian Reader relies on a lot of urban places that, you know, I can only hit up so many places on my island so many times. I want to expand the project to include other people. So look out for a potential call for participation in maybe exploring the dystopian reader where you live, or if you want to get involved, but that's kind of still in the works on my end. So yeah, thanks so much for having me here.
Thank you, Rosie. And next up, we'll hear from Laurie O'Brien.
Hi, everyone. It's great to see you all. And I also am really honored to be part of this book. Thank you. It's so great to see that it's come alive again, and it kind of like keeps going and going and going. And I'm really inspired to go out and make more pieces. So the image that you're seeing right there, my interest in street art, street collage, or hidden art started for me in Paris. I lived in Paris for a year when I was in my 20s, and my best friend there, she really introduced me to different kinds of street art in Paris. There's a lot of stencils and there's a lot of collage work there, as opposed to tags. Like you see a lot more tags, I think, in America. And she knew about all these different kinds of artists and followed them and really educated me. And what it did is it made going outside every day for just normal things a most magical, fun experience. Like walking around cities and looking for this hidden art was just so much fun. And so this friend of mine, she's still my closest friend, and I visit her every year in Paris. And and she has a son who's my godchild, who's a young kid. And so when I was visiting her, I decided, she gave me the route that she takes every morning to take him to school. And I decided to place a bunch of hidden art like all over the place on her route. And so this is not my art, by the way. This is art that I'm inspired by.
Yours? Oh, I'm so sorry.
No,
I grabbed it out of your folder.
The first one was mine. That was in Paris. And then this one was done in Paris on a tree. So anyway, I made these hidden art all the way to the route that she takes every morning. And her and her son had to find these pieces for the whole year. And it was just so much fun for me that they kept finding them and other people found them, and it was just great. So I got excited about like collage street art, or what I would say is hidden art. Rosie mentioned that before. And I just wanted to explore it more. And so when we had the Kolaj Fest in New Orleans, the year of the hurricane, we all three of us, Rosie, Lance, and I, all had the same interests. And so that kind of is how the Kolaj Street Krewe came to be. And like Rosie said, there was a hurricane, and so we had very little time to actually be outside. But then I stayed a little bit longer. And so when Kolaj Fest was over, I was in New Orleans for a few more days, and the weather had calmed down. And that's really when I went out there and did a lot of my collaging in New Orleans. And it just was so much fun. And it makes cities really magical and special. And so I continue to do it in other cities that I visit. And yeah, I want to say that when I was looking at Lance's, I love how Lance goes to different cities, and like, I don't know, it's just like a kind of fun project to do as you travel. So I'm very inspired by that, Lance. And that's about it.
Thanks. Sorry, I got this wrong. Were any of these yours?
Yeah, that one's mine. They're all mine except that one with the pipe. I think that's I don't know whose that is, but that was when we did our little workshop for the Kolaj Street Krewe. I just showed some pieces to inspire people. Oh, that one's mine. That one's in New Orleans. I believe.
Great.
So yeah.
Oh, thank you, Laurie.
Yeah. Oh, and all of my pieces, by the way, are really small, like about an inch. So when I say hidden art, like I really I'm attracted to having it kind of be subtle and unobtrusive. You have to find it or you come upon it. So that's kind of, I think, what my specialty is.
Yeah, I love the mystery of it. You know, it's like an adventure.
Yeah.
Thank you. Next up, we're going to hear from Tim Gratkowski. He was one of the residents in the 2021 Kolaj Street Art Residency.
The project for the residency I found very interesting for a couple of reasons, and kind of adjacent to my regular studio practice. And what I loved about this project, first and foremost, was, you know, we were still kind of coming out of the malaise of the pandemic, so it was a great opportunity to get out and kind of go explore the city in a quiet way when no one else was around. So it made for really ideal circumstances to put some very big pieces up, relatively undetected in a city that's usually very crowded and dense with people and traffic. And so I tried to look for places that were still very frequently by traffic routes on the street, as the image that you see on the screen kind of illustrates. And what I liked about this project in the residency was how I looked at a very focused street art project, and how it was different from my studio practice, but the overlapping similarities, you know. And what I liked about this most of all was I didn't have a specific agenda or project in mind, but through all of the mistakes and mishaps and how I looked at what I was doing, how it evolved, it turned into a much bigger project. So I kind of embraced all the mistakes and the uncertainties about it, and then kind of cultivated into something much larger. And when I started this, I just thought I would do single words, you know, random words, scatter them all about. But as a project developed, I then decided, well, the individual words on their own were interesting enough, but really had no larger context or meaning behind it. And so I didn't change what I started out with, which was the first word or the second word. I tried to use those words and kind of evolve it into a larger statement. And it took some doing, but I was able to put it together in a crafty kind of way. And the images you're seeing were scattered probably, I would say, a 10-mile radius throughout LA and where I was working from. And I would make each word on these collage pieces and then cut out the letters as you see. So what you're seeing on the street right now and on the screen is actually the negative of what ultimately became used for these larger pieces. And as I would find locations for them, I would try to find them in the most, I don't know, it was almost like color sensitive. Like I was still playing around with a palette, an idea of the word, which I thought would be interesting in those locations, so that it would make you wonder a little bit more about what you were seeing, or even what it meant on the word all by itself, not connected to anything else. And I always imagined that people would, it would be impossible for it, but I imagined it that people would start to see the relationship and start to connect these words that they'd see scattered around Los Angeles. But it's funny, this image is a still from a slow motion video I did after I put this piece up, and I ran past it really slow, and I was kind of entertained by the video.
I fell in love with this. When I was putting the book together, I kept seeing the thumbnail of this video, and I was like, there's just something about this that's really cool. So I had to grab a still of it and put it in there.
No, I appreciate that too. I got a big chuckle out of seeing it too, because of where it came from. But I like the image myself, so it was fun. But the idea, I mean, this was a very concentrated short period of time, which evolved into a much larger project, with all these words kind of in what they entailed. And in, I think it was a little less than, I don't know if anyone remembers how many days it was, but, you know, roughly it was 30 days, but it was a little less than that. But in 30 days, I think each individual letter wound up being like 49 letters or something like that. And the words I then combined into the bigger statement. And so it was a lot of work, but it was an intense period of focus, which I really appreciated. But what was interesting and what I normally do is that after it was done in the studio, then you had to consider the context in which you put it out there, you know, and as part of the process, and we were talking about earlier before we went live, is just the process of documentation of all this, you know, which I'm kind of obsessed with. But it was nice to see all the bits and pieces either made in the studio or scattered throughout Los Angeles. And then it would culminate in what you're looking at right now, which was one very large, I think it was 12 feet wide by 8 feet tall. And I found it in a location that was one of these main surface streets that goes into downtown Los Angeles that a lot of people take. And it was just to the right of an intersection. So people would stop and pause and see this, you know. And when it went up, I love the location and I would visit it often. People were watching me put it up. I'd go back to the site and find people taking selfies or photographing it. And so I knew it was like an actively engaged location, which I was happy about. And then I think we were even talking in our discussion groups during the residency that once it was up, I had this idea because, you know, you can see kind of surrounding the piece, there was a filled with graffiti, the entire side of this building. And I always imagined that someone would come past there and graffiti over my piece, or even part of it or something of that. And so I had this idea that if that would happen, I would go back and take it down, take it back to my studio and do something else to it, and ultimately keep it for myself. But sadly, in the case of most of this, after 1 week, I went back, put it up on a Sunday, and the following Sunday I went back, and I had this idea that, oh, someone was going to graffiti it and I would take it back or, you know, reclaim it myself. And sure enough, someone took the entire piece down, you know, which was kind of great, you know. It's like, but also I was kind of sad, like it was something I was kind of hoping for a second life from it. But you know, in the end, ultimately, I was excited about the final piece that you kind of see in it. I like that it had, what I could tell from visiting the site, it had a very active audience that was seeing it and kind of wondering what it meant and taking their own pictures of it. So I felt that, if not the size alone, the location activated people's imagination and participation in encountering the piece, you know, which was, you know, a good outcome.
And maybe now it's sitting in someone's garage, or do you think someone like took it home, or do you think someone trashed it?
You know, it's a good question. I would like to think someone was able to grab it, and yeah, maybe it's in their garage, maybe it's on a wall, or, you know, yeah, no doubt someone could have just discarded it, you know. Hopefully you'd think that whomever took it down saw it in a way that thought it was a little bit more than just trash.
Yeah, and that's something we talked a lot about too in the residency, was like the afterlife of the work that you do, and sort of, and I mean, I think the subtitle to that residency was letting go of the art, or something like along those lines. And you know, that's what you have to do if you're willing to put it out there. Yeah,
absolutely. You know, and in a lot of cases when I would put something up and I'd go back and revisit it and document it, just the weather, the wear and tear on it, it'd be interesting to see which ones were gone immediately. In some cases, I'd scout a location, put it up, and drive back again to take another picture of it. And it was already gone within a half hour to an hour. So some of them are gone before you know it. And some of them have a life. Like a couple pieces were up for, I think, like 6 months, which was great to see. And, you know, and it's completely faded and coming off. But, you know, I like that it becomes part of the city and kind of deteriorates along with it. You know, it's fun to see that process.
Yeah, definitely. All right, well, thank you, Tim. Next up is Gabriela Gutiérrez, another one of the artists in that residency.
Hi everyone. Nice to be here. I'm Gabriela. I'm from Lima, Peru. So during my time at the residency, I chose to make these small matchboxes, which to me spoke about social vulnerability. Just as Tim said, during the residency, at least here in Peru, the government restrictions that were currently applied there were very strict, and there was a lot of feeling of uncertainty and a lot of vulnerability felt due to our health system. And I wanted to just address this feeling of uncertainty and the fear that the collective fear that everyone in the population were feeling. So I thought it would be interesting. It would be very powerful, maybe, to just start making the small collages, sort of like and inside a box, so that you can maybe open them or just to try to search them in the streets, and maybe try to feel like this feeling of uncertainty, but in another way, through an art perspective, and try to feel it. Just this sense of playfulness that you can see inside the matchbox, and maybe to think that it was for you, or if it was for someone else and you weren't sure, but you took it and you made it your own. So that was the first part of it, and I just tried to just exercise different types of messages. I also, in my collage practice, I tend to put images and also words and sometimes poems in Spanish. There you can see three very small matchboxes on top of a bench on the park. There you can see the zoom of each one of them. And I waited for some time for people to take it or just see what happens. I actually got to see an old lady that was very doubtful if I should take it, if it's for me, what to say. I want it for me. So I wanted to generate that sort of feeling. And currently it's actually very, very interesting that what I pretended to do during the residency, actually right now, even though I haven't continued this as much as I would like to, I am thinking of making actually maybe larger pieces that I could make a statement, maybe still in the same the same like the same format of the matchboxes, but like with large boxes. Just because right now, well, you can see another one there on top of the garbage can. Just because right now, if you very quickly Google Peruvian political crisis, maybe you will find very astonishing things. I don't know if you guys know about that. So we are currently having multiple protests all around the country, and there has been more than 50 deaths all over the country. So it's very, very hard, and it's actually very hard for me to be here because I have been also protesting. And well, anyway, so I think what is maybe happening right now with my collage in the form of street art is making political collage and making statements, but also trying to generate hope for people, because the conflict right now is very big, and maybe you can find some of these matchboxes or work that maybe adds a sort of maybe hidden art sometimes, but also as like a very big statement in some other moments. Maybe you can feel that that there is hope, or that you can be inspired, or that you can control something that doesn't make you so fearful to just be. So yeah, that's kind of what I wanted to convey. Thanks.
But yeah, I think we do another project, Politics in Collage, and I think there's a lot of crossover. Street art is inherently a political statement, right? I mean, just the act of taking back that public space that, that advertisements and billboards have been doing against your will forever, where as artists, you're making a statement just by putting art out there without permission.
Right, and I just remembered that when during the residency, I just wanted to read this quote very, very quickly. I put this Banksy quote that said, "The greatest crimes in the world are not committed by people breaking the rules, but by people following the rules. It's people who follow orders that drop bombs and massacre villages." So yes, currently that speaks very deep to my heart right now.
Well, I can't wait to see what comes out of that, what the next piece of work that you do. Thank you. All right, and last but not least, Celia Crane. Celia, are you still here? Oh, you're muted.
Sorry, I was muted. Hello, everyone. Again, I'm Celia, and I'm a collage artist and a writer, and I do independent curation. And I was a resident in 2021 with Kolaj Institute, and my work is in the book. Thank you so much. It's a beautiful volume. To keep my commentary brief, I'm going to focus on just two key topics. And the first is why street art? For me, I've loved graffiti ever since I can remember. And I've done a lot of trips just looking for graffiti, taking like thousands of pictures of, just very inspiring large murals, traveled through New York City and other places, probably about 20 states in the US looking for graffiti. So it's very close to my heart. But in a larger sense, I think street art has an important place in art history, and it's still developing, obviously. And I think in the intro of the book, Rick did a fabulous job of kind of setting the stage. And I'd like to just read a quick excerpt, if I could. Hopefully everyone has the book, and if not, hopefully they will get it. But he says it so perfectly. He says, street art grew out of a time when art was confined to galleries and museums, arbitrated by institutional power, and reserved for those of a particular class. It was not proper art made by proper artists, but rather a type of hooliganism that reflected the dismantling of a social order. Rick goes on to explain the very act of placing art on public-facing property questions ownership of public space and the propriety of the visual landscape of a community. And I think it's really brilliant. And I really resonated with Rosie's comments about kind of subverting or bypassing the gallery system. And in general, I think there's something inherently wrong with the fact that the images and messages that are transmitted to society are still really controlled almost exclusively by those with wealth and power. And if there's one characteristic that all artists share, is that we have something to say. I think that the fact, what's important, beautiful, or edifying when it's decided by a select few by virtue of societal rank or status, it's not reasonable. So, looking at the history of our species, those in power have really terrible ideas about things a lot of the time. So street art really subverts the limitations of our social structure and the way it limits our communication. So I think that, to me, I make art because I have to, it's a compulsion, but I share art for very deliberate reasons. And for me, collage art is kind of like a love letter I've written to the world. And I feel like the world doesn't really need to love me back, but at least I want people to be able to read my letter. A year ago, one of my collages was chosen and was up in a major gallery here in Rochester. And it was a huge honor. It was really weird, actually. Meanwhile, I'm doing street art, and then I have this piece in this big gallery. And it was up for 2 months. And like I said, it felt great, but I'm quite confident that more people saw the street art pieces I put up during the residency than had seen that piece in the gallery. And, the thing that really makes it special for me is that audience that saw my pieces wasn't segregated, and there was no entrance fees, and there's no algorithms kind of hiding the work. And so it's important. And I feel really strongly that collage artists should be operating in this space, but how do we do that? And that's my second topic. I just like to cover briefly because I feel like answering that question was kind of gets to the heart of what our residency was all about. It was super inspiring to see the wide range of approaches to getting the work out there. Everyone was doing different things. We were all experimenting. I had set up a wall in my backyard, kind of like a lab to test different wheat paste and things like that. Many of the artists were making and enlarging originals, which I think is a really sound method for folks that's also infinitely repeatable, which is nice. In the end, I chose to hang originals because for me, the tangible materiality of my work is kind of a crucial component. So during the residency, I made a dozen small pieces that kind of served as studies on 228 labels, and Lance does these all the time. And you know, the cool thing about this substrate, if you're not familiar, is they're free and until they kind of figure us out and limit it. But you can get them from the post office for free. And the neat thing is you can make collages, and here's one I had just started this morning, actually. You know, so you can make your collages and you can stick them up without drawing a lot of attention to yourself. So I placed these all around Rochester. And ironically, there's one, I checked this last week, there's one that's still up all this time later. It doesn't look anything like it looked before because I really didn't weatherize these very much, but it's still pretty cool. But, you know, I put these small pieces up. I really want my desire, inspired by, you know, the mural graffiti that I love. I really wanted to go large. And this is where the facilitators and artists in the residency really helped me. So I typically work really small, and scaling this series was hard for me. So it took me about a month to complete this big, it's 6 by 6 feet, big collage. I built it on pine wood substrate. And the materials I used were all kinds of things: vintage newspapers, tape, pieces of other artwork, and kind of all came together in this piece, which I attached to a boarded up kind of abandoned entrance that was covered with plywood. And so I just used 16 drywall screws and attached it. And it was the biggest collage I've made. So that felt like a big success. And, you know, kind of like Tim had said, I went back every day and I took a lot of pictures of people when they were walking by, which was really fun, especially when someone was like, whoa, what the hell is that? You know, I kind of wanted it to be a little alarming, and it was up for 8 days and then it was gone. But, you know, we're not sure who took it down. We can only imagine. Tim, maybe our pieces will show up somewhere in the future, who knows? But I didn't get arrested. I felt pretty good about it. And, you know, I think that just the coming together of artists to, you know, who are decidedly non-competitive with one another, who just want to work together to find new ways and get our work out there and work together as a community is really heartening. And it was a really good experience for me in the residency. Hope to do something like that again soon. And I have a note here on my card, concise, because I tend to ramble, but I really want to thank Collage for hosting the session, for the residency, for the book, and just for all their efforts supporting artists and advancing collage. If anyone has further questions for me or anything, I'm available, and I'll put my information in the chat as well.
Thank you, Celia. Thank you, everybody. I feel like I almost put in no effort into this event, and then it's just by the miracle and the artistry of all of you that it feels just like really powerful still. Like just like everyone talking has given me chills. I really appreciate you all being a part of this project. Here's the cover of the book. I made this cover. I made this collage, and here's a little picture of me putting it up here in New Orleans. Just thought I'd share that as well. All right, and then I bet we've got some questions. Let's see if we have any questions. And if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. Oh, someone asked Tim what the size of that large piece was. I think you said like 12 by 8. Yeah. Everyone's dropping their social media in the chat. That's awesome. Let's see. All right. Anybody have any questions? I mean, I guess some people already answered this, but my question was just going to be, you know, what are you working on next or now? Are there any street art projects that you're itching to do?
Well, as I mentioned, can you hear me?
Yeah.
As I mentioned earlier, I'm working on a project that was a call from the Kiev Collage Collective in Ukraine. They're going to be putting up like, you know, banners all over the city from Collage or other artists that send them a certain size banner. So I'm putting a lot of effort into that right now, along with just kind of some other stuff around my community, putting up my regular little collages. I'm also really big, like Tim said, into documenting the whole process. And I've been trying to get more into documenting other people's work as well. So as I'm outputting my stuff out, taking pictures of other people's stuff, and I've been sharing that in our Facebook group as well, along with other stuff that I found around the internet from some of my other connections. So more documenting, more working, and yeah, just kind of forcing myself to get the paste out.
Paste. It wouldn't be a Collage Live Online event without a question about glue. Pamela asks, what do you use to affix the work? Are they laminated? And I think we all have different answers for that. So if anybody wants to jump in and just start us off, and then we can go from there.
There's so many ways to do it.
Tell us how you did it, Celia.
Well, I tested like 10 different things. I mean, there's wheat paste, all kinds of great recipes. Rosie offered a really good recipe, and I looked up some others and tried them all. In the end, I liked Elmer's glue and water. 3-to-1 ratio was the one that worked best for me. And I didn't end up doing that anyway. I screwed my things to the wall, which enabled me to use my normal stuff, which is, you know, Mod Podge, gel medium, and then, you know, top coats, lots of top coats for something outside is what I did.
I
think someone, oh, go ahead. No, go ahead.
sorry. No, I just want to say I use double tape, but because specifically for me, I wanted my collage to be removable. So it couldn't be just like a very hard glue.
And I think that's something that Lance does too, right? You use double-sided tape as well. Yeah. You're muted.
Unmute. So yeah, this I think is from Scotch or 3M. It's kind of puffy and padded. So it tends to keep the work out from the surface a little bit, and it makes it fairly easy to remove. But if you don't try to remove it, it will keep it there for a really long time. So I had put up a, I work a lot on like LP records and 45 records. I put a 45 record on the back of a stop sign, and the elements eventually got rid of all the collage on the record. 2 years later, the 45 was still stuck to the back of the stop sign, which I thought was still great, because, you know, people are like, what the heck, why is that just a plain 45 record on the back of the stop sign?
I was going to say earlier, someone asked a similar question before, and I kind of said, well, it really all depends on the surface you're sticking, whatever you're sticking to, and the type and or the thickness of that paper or material, like an LP or a postcard. And it's different in every single condition. So some glues will work in one condition, but not in another. The best thing you can do is really experiment, you know. And I think in my process with this residency, I played around with a bunch of different things, because one material or adhesive would work in one situation, which I just kind of illustrated, and not in another. And I'd have to switch because I really wanted to stick it on that surface, but it wouldn't work. And I think I used everything from Super 77 to double stick tape. I have the same exact tape, and then making my own kind of version and experimentation with wheat paste, which I kind of developed, which would stick to most of the surfaces I would be interested in and have the most success staying up there, you know, because I think the last thing you want to do is go through the effort, try to adhere it, and it just falls off almost when you're walking away. So you kind of have to experiment and test a few things, make sure it's going to stay, that's the key thing.
And I remember, Tim, weren't you dealing with anti-graffiti paint there in LA?
Yeah, exactly, which almost nothing sticks to, so it's not even worth it. But you find that out immediately too. I mean, if someone could figure out how to use the anti-graffiti kind of paint that goes over the paint and use it against itself, that would be brilliant. But that's another experiment.
I use also glue, watered down white Elmer's glue or Sobo glue. And I find that works really well for small pieces. But when we were in New Orleans, I remember Rosie was making this big bucket of wheat paste. And that was my first experience with it. And it was kind of intense. Like she had to put it in the refrigerator and cook it up. But I think it's a fantastic way to work if you have large pieces and it's very inexpensive. So yeah, I think those two methods are both really good.
Yeah, actually, I have images to share from that too. I forgot.
Oh, good. Yeah, I was worried with the hurricane. I was worried if maybe we might end up eating that stuff.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I'm glad that, our giant pile of wheat paste did end up getting used for the collaborative slab. That was good. There we go. There's the slab.
Yeah, so it was Kolaj Fest 2019. We set up this post gallery, as we were calling it. And the idea was that after the workshop, the Collage Street Art workshop that Lance and Rosie and Laurie did, that then we would encourage people to come out here and put stuff up. Unfortunately, that Collage Fest got rained out by Hurricane Barry. Also disappointing because that hurricane was barely a hurricane. But this is pretty much all we got up there. I think you put a piece up and we put this little Collage Fest sticker up, and then we never actually got back to it. It stayed up there for a really long time. This was another artist, Michael Pahone. This was his yard essentially that we put it up outside of, and we cooked up that big batch of wheat paste. And so then we were all stuck inside because of the rain for that weekend. So we ended up using the wheat paste on this that we call it the collab slab. And everyone in that collage making space was encouraged to contribute to it. This is Rosie's piece with the gun and the flowers, and then Lance's piece with the CD. That's me with a piece that I put up, and then you can see as it started to grow, and then that's the finished product. And we still have that. We still have that collab slab. It makes its appearance every now and then at different Collage Fest events.
Very cool. Yeah, sorry, as everyone said, wheat paste is probably the most economical glue that you can whip up. I will say, I live in a very rainy environment on the Pacific Northwest here, and with my experience, molding can actually be an issue. So, depending on weathering and that sort of thing, if you want it to be a little bit more long lasting, then using the watered down Elmer's glue or acrylic medium, or actually wallpaper paste, which you can get at hardware stores, is probably a bit better if you're concerned about molding, because it has happened to me with wheat paste.
Karen asked specifically, what did you use to put the collage on the trees?
That was wheat paste, and I wanted to keep it natural to, I don't want to hurt the tree. But and it, stayed up for a very long time until the tree decided to shed.
One last question. Do you distinguish the social commentary for graffiti as different than that of collage street art? Graffiti has a long history, and was this considered before beginning? Removability as an example? That question comes from Selena. That's a deep question. I don't know. Does anyone have an answer to that?
I want to say something. That's actually really important to me. I don't like the whole feeling of tagging somebody else's private property. So it was really important to me personally that it could be removable, that it would disappear after a couple of seasons of rain, that if somebody got upset about it, it could just easily wash away, and that it was small and not ostentatious. Now, that being said, I do love graffiti art in certain ways, but I I felt uncomfortable doing that to somebody else's private property. I think we talked about that when we were putting together this whole thing, is we also wanted to remain anonymous in a way, but then as a collective, we didn't want to remain anonymous because we had the tag Kolaj Street Krewe. And once we were not anonymous, like, you know, things could have pointed back to us. Were we just destroying people's property? So we just talked about some basic rules about that, I think. But it's a great question. I think it's a kind of a gray area. I would love to hear what other people on the panel have to say about that.
Yeah, I feel very similar. You know, I absolutely respect, you know, those artists who have gone out there and risked, you know, their livelihoods and their lives. You know, we wouldn't be doing what we're doing right now if it wasn't for those crappy graffiti artists, honestly, you know, and the good ones, of course, as well. But, you know, those people who go out and tag the trains and, you know, every day are out there spraying and drawing. Totally respect that. I can't personally get into it myself. I do a lot of illegal work, but like you said, most of mine is easily removable. And really not necessarily because I want it to be removed, but just like you said, because I don't necessarily feel like I want to damage somebody else's property, even if it's just you know, some construction site or something. So that's just my personal view on it.
Oh, also, one other thing I wanted to say is that when we were doing this, I researched it a little bit, and I can't remember what the rule is in New Orleans, but there's different rules for tagging or destroying property with like a marker that's impermanent, as opposed to putting up a sticker. So you won't get in as much trouble if you put up a sticker or something like a collage that can be removed, as opposed, it's a whole different category. If you get caught, just to let people know who are interested in doing this, just know what you're getting into.
Yeah, but I do know, especially in New York, I think there are some pretty famous sticker artists that have been jailed just for stickers as well.
Yeah, well, a big thing for me, the residency, and you know, my co-residents will remember, like, I can't go to jail. Like, that's not something I'm willing to do. I've had these dogs relying on me. So I felt that, you know, it was a good, because I did want to go big and ostentatious. It was a good compromise to be screwing wood to plywood. That, like, okay, the only permanent damage is those small holes. And this is really crappy plywood that I'm screwing to. So I kind of felt okay about that. And I would do that again. I didn't feel bad about that, but I feel the same, because, you know, especially if I don't know who owns the building, that you know, you could really ruin someone's year, you know, if you do something permanently to damage in their minds, to damage their building. That's not nice. So.
Oh, and I do just personally feel differently toward like public or city or county property than I do to someone else's private property. I don't know why. It shouldn't really make that much of a difference, but like, you know, like Tim, like an electrical box or some kind of other thing that they're constantly having to clean anyway. I somehow feel differently about that. I don't know why.
Boards.
Yeah,
I have no problem with people putting stuff on billboards.
Right. I agree with that too. It's like there's like a threshold between spaces which you're either comfortable with or which you're willing to cross because, you know, it doesn't cross a line you draw for yourself. But I agree. I wouldn't put anything on newer or personal property, but I seem to, at least me personally, migrate to these interstitial spaces and forgotten spaces or leftover spaces, or specifically spaces that are already contaminated, you know, like graffiti on top of graffiti. You know, even though there's a street culture and respect to that, you're not really supposed to do it. But when you see so many kind of areas that are literally in an urban or rural situation that's already covered with stickers and taggers and everything else, I don't feel as apprehensive to not use that space like it's been used before me, you know. But I will admit in certain instances, and I've thought about certain places where you seem to slow down. There's a nervousness being the first one at a location, you know, and if I've got to pace back and forth more than 5 minutes, I'm like, nope, it's not worth it. I gotta find another place. But yeah, I think being respectful is important, for sure.
Yeah, on that note, I actually recently had an altercation. I like to also, like Laurie talked about, like hidden pieces. I like to put things inside buildings as well. So museums and historic houses, I put some stuff in a drawer in the Hemingway house and the keys for people to find later, usually a cleaning crew or something like that. But I was in a museum in Scotland and had put a piece in a stairwell. And as I was walking out the building, the security guard approached me with it. Thought I was going to get in a lot of trouble, but he was like, "Oh, here, I think this is yours." Like they had obviously seen me on camera and came and found me. And I was like, "Oh, here, you can keep that." And he's like, "No, I have to give this back to you or I have to file a report." I'm like, "Okay, thank you." And then I just put it up somewhere else outside.
Oh, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I just, oh, Laurie or I?
You, yeah.
No, yes, I just want to say I agree with all of you, and specifically with the difference between private property and public spaces. But I mean, right now, for example, due to the protests, there has been like a lot of questioning within me of the limits of what's legal and what's illegal. Because the police repression has been very brutal, and just yesterday they broke in a university to try to take out protesters and people who actually lived inside campus. So then after that, a lot of protesters tried to just they graffitied every single wall on the main district. So then you're just try to think, well, so what's the limit on street art, right?
Well, and then for Kolaj Institute, we do try to get permission walls essentially for so specifically this upcoming Kolaj Street Art Residency in New Orleans. I'm going to post a link in the chat for the call to artists for that. We are working to secure a couple walls from local venues and things like that, where they're going to give us access and let us pay some stuff up. We might also, I think we're going to have our own studio space by that point. So I think we'll be able to maybe invite people over to our studio space to graffiti or to put up street art as well. And that brings us to the end of today's event. So thank you everybody so much for being here and speaking. And that is the link for the call to artists for the Kolaj Street Art Residency. That is going to take place around Kolaj Fest this year. So there will be like a few days before Kolaj Fest starts, where we'll be really intensive, and Lance is definitely going to be there. Rosie and Laurie might be coming to Kolaj Fest this year, in which case they will also be a part of this programming. So we'll be teaching you some tricks. We'll be talking more about glue and wheat paste and things like that. And we're talking about the history of street art in general, and then we'll be asking you to get out there and put up street art. And if you want to do it illegally, that's up to you. But we'll also have some walls for you to practice on as well. And then Kolaj Fest will take place, and you'll be invited to participate in that. Your fee to participate in the residency will also pay for your registration to Kolaj Fest. And then as Kolaj Fest wraps up, we will have our own sort of wrap up within that residency, and we'll sort of review what had been done that week. So I'm really excited about that. I think this is going to be a really fun residency. So please apply. And thank you again, everybody, for being here.
Thank you.
You.
Have a good night, everybody.